Maya Chun had always been drawn to the abandoned places of the world. As a xenoarchaeologist specializing in pre-contact alien civilizations, she spent her days digging through the remnants of species that had vanished long before humanity ever looked to the stars. But nothing had prepared her for what lay buried beneath the red sands of Kepler 442b. The expedition had started like any other. Her team of 12 researchers had arrived on the desert planet 3 months ago, following energy signatures that suggested the presence of ancient technology. The planet had been dead for over a millennium, its atmosphere still breathable, but its surface scarred by what appeared to be a massive war. Twisted metal structures jutted from the sand like the ribs of some titanic beast, and strange crystalline formations dotted the landscape in perfect geometric patterns. Maya wiped the sweat from her brow as she carefully brushed sand away from what looked like a metallic surface. Her scanner was going crazy, picking up energy readings unlike anything in the database. The metal beneath her tools was smooth, almost liquid in appearance, with a dark blue sheen that seemed to shift and flow even though it was completely solid. "Dr. Chun, you need to see this," called out James Rodriguez, her second-in-command. He was standing about 50 meters away, his own scanner held high above his head. The device was emitting a steady, urgent beeping that carried across the dig site. Maya stood up, dusting off her knees, and jogged over to where James stood. The ground beneath his feet looked different from the rest of the dig site. Instead of the rough, sandy texture they had been working through for months, this area was smooth, almost glassy. As she got closer, Maya could see that it wasn't ground at all, but rather the top of some massive structure buried beneath centuries of accumulated sand and debris. "How deep do you think it goes?" Maya asked, kneeling down to examine the surface more closely. Her fingers traced across what appeared to be symbols etched into the material. They were unlike any alien script she had ever encountered, flowing and organic in a way that suggested they might actually be alive. "Scans show at least 200 meters, James replied, his voice filled with excitement. "Maya, I think we found it. The source of those energy readings." Maya felt her heart rate increase. In her 15 years as a xenoarchaeologist, she had made significant discoveries before. She had been part of the team that uncovered the Zephyrian ruins on Proxima Centauri C, and she had personally discovered the crystal libraries of the extinct Vorthax species. But this felt different. This felt important in a way that made her hands shake slightly as she ran her scanner over the strange surface. The symbols beneath her fingers seemed to respond to her touch, glowing faintly with a soft, blue-white light. The effect was subtle at first, barely visible in the harsh daylight of Kepler 442b's twin suns. But as she continued to trace the patterns, the glow intensified, spreading outward from her fingers like ripples on a pond. "James, are you recording this?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every second," he confirmed. "Maya, look at your scanner." Maya glanced down at the device, clipped to her belt. The energy readings had spiked dramatically, but more importantly, new symbols had appeared on the display. They matched the ones under her fingers exactly, as if the scanner was somehow translating them in real time. The translation was simple: library access granted to compatible species. Neural interface recommended for full data access. Maya's breath caught in her throat. A library. Not just any library, but one that was somehow still active after more than 1,000 years. She had heard rumors of such places, ancient repositories of knowledge left behind by species so advanced that their technology seemed like magic. But she had never expected to find one herself. "We need to call this in," James said, but his voice lacked conviction. They both knew what would happen if they reported this discovery immediately. The Colonial Authority would send in a military team, the site would be classified, and Maya and her team would be lucky to get a footnote in the official reports. "Not yet," Maya said firmly. "We document everything first. We make sure we understand what we're dealing with before anyone else gets involved." Over the next week, Maya's team worked around the clock to excavate the entrance to the buried structure. What they found defied explanation. The building, for lack of a better term, was not built so much as grown. The walls were organic in appearance, flowing and curving in impossible ways that seemed to follow some alien aesthetic that human minds could barely comprehend. The entrance, when they finally cleared it, was a perfect arch that stood nearly 4 meters tall. The same flowing symbols covered every surface, and as Maya approached, they began to glow with that same soft light she had first observed. But now there were words appearing in her scanner's display, a continuous stream of text in perfect English. Welcome, young species, to the great library of Ethros. Your neural patterns indicate high compatibility with our data storage systems. Please note, access to certain restricted materials requires authorization from the High Council. Such authorization has not been granted in 1,230 standard years. Maya read the message aloud to her team, her voice echoing strangely in the entrance chamber. The space beyond the arch was vast, disappearing into darkness that their lights couldn't penetrate. But as she stepped forward, bioluminescent panels began to activate along the walls and ceiling, revealing a space that defied the laws of physics. The library stretched in all directions, further than should have been possible given the external dimensions of the structure they had excavated. Shelves rose impossibly high, their tops lost in misty darkness above. But these were not shelves for books in any sense that humans would understand. Instead, they held what looked like living crystals, each one pulsing with its own inner light. And floating between the shelves, moving with purpose and intelligence, were constructs that could only be described as librarians. The beings, if they could be called that, were roughly humanoid in shape, but seemed to be made of the same flowing, liquid metal as the walls. They moved with perfect grace, tending to the crystal repositories and occasionally pausing to examine Maya and her team with what might have been curiosity. "My God," whispered Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's linguist. "It's beautiful." Maya had to agree. Despite the alien nature of everything around them, there was something inherently peaceful about the library. The soft glow of the crystals, the gentle movement of the librarian constructs, the way their footsteps seemed to be absorbed by the strange material of the floor. It all combined to create an atmosphere of profound calm and reverence for knowledge. As they moved deeper into the library, Maya began to understand the organization system. The crystals were arranged not by subject matter, as human libraries might be, but by what her scanner translated as conceptual resonance. Ideas that were related or complementary were placed near each other, creating a three-dimensional web of knowledge that spanned the entire vast space. Her scanner was working overtime, translating labels and descriptions as they passed. There were crystals containing the complete histories of dozens of species, mathematical theorems that pushed the boundaries of what Maya thought possible, artistic works that existed as pure information, waiting to be experienced rather than simply viewed. But it was James who made the most significant discovery of that first day in the library. He had wandered off while Maya was examining a particularly fascinating crystal that seemed to contain the entire genetic history of species called the Morathan. When he called out to her, his voice was strained with a mixture of excitement and fear. "Maya, you need to see this." Now, Maya found him standing before a section of the library that was different from the rest. Here, the crystals were darker, their glow muted and somehow ominous. Red warning symbols floated in the air above them, and even without translation, Maya could tell they meant danger. But James wasn't looking at the crystals. He was staring at a gap in the shelving, a space where something had clearly been removed recently. The dust patterns on the shelf made it obvious that whatever had been there was large, about the size of a human head, and had been taken within the last few hours. "One of the librarians was carrying it when I got here," James explained. "It saw me watching and I think it was embarrassed. It put the crystal back quickly and moved away, but I could see the labels." Maya looked at her scanner, which was still translating the warning signs floating above the empty space. What she read made her blood run cold. Restricted. Species classification Omega. Access forbidden by High Council Decree 847,291. Warning. Information contained within has been deemed catastrophically dangerous to galactic stability. Unauthorized access punishable by immediate termination of species status. What does that mean? James asked. Species status? Maya didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about the implications, about what kind of information could be so dangerous that an entire species could be terminated for accessing it. And, more importantly, she was thinking about the fact that one of the librarian constructs had been in the process of removing it when James had arrived. We need to find that crystal, Maya said finally. Maya, did you read the warning? Catastrophically dangerous to galactic stability. Maybe we should leave this alone. But Maya was already moving, following the path the librarian construct had taken. Her scanner was picking up traces of the unique energy signature the forbidden crystal had been emitting. The trail led deeper into the library, past sections containing knowledge that made her head spin with its complexity and scope. She found the construct in what appeared to be a maintenance area, where damaged or corrupted crystals were brought for repair. The being, and Maya was beginning to think of them as beings rather than mere constructs, was moving with obvious distress, its liquid metal form shifting and flowing in agitated patterns. When it noticed Maya approaching, it stopped and turned to face her. For a moment, they regarded each other in silence. Then, to Maya's surprise, symbols began appearing in the air between them, translated instantly by her scanner. You should not be here, young species. The knowledge you seek is forbidden for good reason. What knowledge? Maya asked, speaking aloud, even though she suspected the being could understand her scanner's transmissions directly. The truth of the great dying. The reason why the galaxy is emptying of intelligent life. The cycle that repeats every 40,000 years, and why humanity's appearance in this galaxy is not coincidence, but design. Maya felt her knees go weak. The Great Dying was a term that xenoarchaeologists used to describe the apparent mass extinction event that had wiped out dozens of advanced civilizations roughly 1,000 years ago. The official theory was that it had been a natural phenomenon, a gamma-ray burst, perhaps, or some kind of plague that affected technological species specifically. But the construct was suggesting something else entirely. Something planned. Something intentional. The High Council forbade access to this information because they believed ignorance would protect the young species. The construct continued. But the cycle begins anew. The signs are appearing. Your species has reached the threshold of technological development that marks the beginning of the end. What threshold? Maya demanded. Faster than light travel. Quantum consciousness transfer. Dimensional manipulation. The technologies that your species calls advanced are merely the bait that draws the attention of those who harvest. Maya's hands were shaking now. Everything the construct was telling her challenged fundamental assumptions about humanity's place in the universe. If they were right, if there really was some kind of cyclical harvest of intelligent species, then everything humanity thought it knew about the galaxy was wrong. Show me, Maya said. The construct's form shifted, becoming more agitated. The knowledge cannot be unlearned. Once you see the truth, you become part of it. Your species will be marked for early harvesting. We're already marked, aren't we? Maya said, understanding beginning to dawn. That's why the library responded to me. That's why my neural patterns are compatible. We're not the first human species to find this place. The construct went very still. Then, slowly, it reached into an alcove Maya hadn't noticed and withdrew a crystal that pulsed with dark, ominous light. The warnings floating above it were in a script that her scanner couldn't translate, but somehow Maya could read them anyway. The knowledge was already inside her head, she realized. Had been since the moment she first touched the symbols at the entrance. The library hadn't just granted her access. It had begun the process of integration, slowly downloading information directly into her consciousness without her even realizing it. The forbidden knowledge, the construct said, holding out the crystal. The true history of this galaxy. The reason why humanity exists. The choice that your species must make if it hopes to break the cycle. Maya reached out with trembling fingers and took the crystal. The moment her skin made contact with its surface, her consciousness exploded outward, touching vast networks of information that span millennia. She saw the rise and fall of countless civilizations, all following the same pattern. Rapid technological advancement, expansion into space, the discovery of certain key technologies, and then harvesting. But she also saw something else. Scattered throughout the data were references to a species that had escaped the cycle, a species that had found a way to hide, to evolve beyond the reach of the harvesters. And the more she learned about them, the more familiar they seemed. They looked almost exactly like humans. Maya's vision began to blur as the download intensified. Vast amounts of information were flooding into her consciousness faster than her human brain could process. She saw the truth of Earth's history, the real reason why humans had evolved so quickly from primitive apes to spacefaring civilization in just a few million years. They were refugees, the descendants of a species that had escaped the previous cycle by seeding primitive worlds with their genetic material and then going into hiding. Humanity wasn't naturally evolved intelligence. They were the carefully engineered children of survivors, designed to appear primitive while retaining the potential for rapid advancement when the time was right. And that time was now. The crystal slipped from Maya's fingers as consciousness faded, but even as darkness closed in around her, she could hear the construct's final words echoing in her mind. The cycle begins anew. The harvesters are returning. But this time, humanity is ready. This time, the prey has become the hunter. When Maya woke up, she was lying on the floor of the maintenance chamber with James kneeling beside her, his face tight with worry. But she barely saw him. Her mind was still reeling with the information the crystal had downloaded into her consciousness. The true history of the galaxy, the nature of the harvesters, and, most importantly, humanity's real purpose in the cosmic order. Maya, are you all right? You've been unconscious for hours. Maya sat up slowly, her head spinning. She could feel the knowledge settling into her mind like sediment, organizing itself into coherent patterns that she could access and understand. But along with the information came something else, an imperative, a driving need to act on what she had learned. James, we need to get back to Earth, she said urgently. We need to contact the colonial authority, the military, everyone. The galaxy is in danger, and humanity is the only species that can stop it. James looked at her with concern. Maya, you're not making sense. What happened when you touched that crystal? Maya looked around the maintenance chamber, but the construct was gone. The crystal lay where she had dropped it, now dark and lifeless. But the knowledge it had contained was permanently etched into her consciousness, along with the terrible responsibility that came with it. I learned the truth, Maya said simply, and now we have work to do. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks aboard the transport ship Meridian. Maya spent every waking hour in her quarters, frantically transcribing everything she could remember from the Forbidden Crystal's download. The knowledge was vast and complex, threatening to overwhelm her human consciousness, but she forced herself to organize it into comprehensible sections. The first thing she documented was the cycle itself. Every 40,000 years, the harvesters emerged from whatever dimension they inhabited to cull the galaxy of intelligent life. They didn't destroy everything. That would be wasteful. Instead, they carefully managed the development of species, allowing them to reach specific technological thresholds before harvesting them for purposes that the crystal's knowledge could only hint at. The harvesters were ancient beyond human comprehension, beings of pure energy and malevolent intelligence who viewed biological life as nothing more than a renewable resource. They had been managing the galaxy for millions of years, seeding suitable worlds with the genetic potential for intelligence, then returning periodically to collect the results. But 40,000 years ago, something had gone wrong with the cycle. One species had managed to escape. The ancients, as the crystal's knowledge referred to them, had reached the harvesting threshold just like countless species before them. But instead of simply advancing their technology in the predictable patterns that made species easy to harvest, they had taken a different path. They had learned to hide. Using advanced genetic engineering and temporal manipulation technology, they had seeded hundreds of primitive worlds throughout the galaxy with their own DNA, carefully modified to lay dormant until the right environmental pressures triggered rapid evolution. Then, they had erased all traces of their civilization and disappeared, leaving behind only the most subtle of markers for their descendants to find when they were ready. Humanity wasn't just descended from the ancients. Humans were the ancients, reduced to their most basic genetic components and scattered across time and space as an insurance policy against extinction. Earth was one of dozens of worlds that had been seeded, though Maya suspected it might be the only one where the plan had succeeded. The crystal had also contained detailed technical specifications for technologies that humanity hadn't even dreamed of yet. Weapons that could tear holes in space-time. Defensive systems that could hide entire star systems from detection. Most importantly, a communication network that could operate across dimensional barriers, allowing for coordination between scattered groups of survivors. Maya had tried to explain some of this to James during the voyage, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. To anyone who hadn't experienced the crystal's download directly, the story sounded like the fevered imaginings of someone who had suffered some kind of neural trauma. The fact that the crystal itself had gone completely inert after her contact with it only made her story seem less credible. But Maya knew what she had experienced was real. And, more importantly, she knew that time was running out. According to the crystal's information, humanity had reached 3 of the 4 threshold technologies that would trigger the harvester's attention. Faster-than-light travel, quantum consciousness transfer, and AI development beyond the basic automation level. The 4th threshold was dimensional manipulation technology, and Maya knew that several human research facilities were already close to breakthrough discoveries in that area. Once humanity crossed that line, the harvesters would take notice and begin preparations for the next culling. The Meridian docked at Luna Station 3 days ahead of schedule. Maya barely waited for the airlock to cycle before she was pushing through the crowded corridors toward the administrative section. She had sent messages ahead, requesting emergency meetings with representatives from the Colonial Authority, the Earth Defense Force, and the Advanced Research Division. What she hadn't expected was to find them all waiting for her. Admiral Sarah Chun, no relation, despite the shared surname, stood in the center of Luna Station's primary briefing room, her weathered face set in grim lines. Around the table sat representatives from every major human organization, along with several faces Maya didn't recognize, but who carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of intelligence operatives. Dr. Chun, Admiral Chun said as Maya entered the room. "Thank you for coming. Please take a seat." Maya remained standing. "You've read my reports." "We've read your claims," said Dr. Marcus Webb, director of the Advanced Research Division. "Frankly, they sound like science fiction. Ancient alien harvesters? Humanity as descended refugees? Cyclical galactic genocide? You will forgive us if we require something more substantial than the word of one archaeologist who may have suffered neural trauma from alien technology." Maya had anticipated this reaction. She reached into her bag and withdrew a datapad containing the technical specifications she had transcribed from the crystal's download. "Then, perhaps you'll be more interested in these." She activated the pad and projected a 3-dimensional schematic into the air above the conference table. The design was clearly beyond current human technology, but not so advanced as to be incomprehensible. It showed what appeared to be a weapon of some kind, with focusing arrays and power coupling systems that used principles Maya was only beginning to understand. "This is a dimensional phase disruptor," Maya said, reading from her notes. "It works by creating localized tiers in space-time that disrupt the quantum coherence of matter at the molecular level. The power requirements are enormous, but The crystal's knowledge includes blueprints for zero-point energy extractors that could provide sufficient output. The room had gone completely silent. Dr. Webb was leaning forward, his eyes scanning the projection with obvious fascination and growing excitement. "These mathematical principles," he said slowly, "they're based on theoretical work that Dr. Yamamoto published just last month. Work that supposedly represents the cutting edge of dimensional physics. How could you possibly know about applications that our best scientists haven't even imagined yet?" "Because someone already imagined them," Maya said, 40,000 years ago, and they left instructions for us to find when we were ready. Admiral Chen stood up, her expression troubled. "Dr. Chun, assuming for a moment that your story is true, and I'm not saying it is, what exactly are you proposing we do about it?" Maya activated another section of the datapad. This projection showed a star map of a local galactic sector, with various systems highlighted in different colors. Blue markers indicated human colonies. Red markers showed locations where advanced alien ruins had been discovered. And scattered throughout the map were gold markers that pulsed with a steady rhythm. The crystal's knowledge included locations of other ancient sites, Maya explained. Facilities like the library on Kepler 442b, but designed for different purposes. Weapons caches, technology repositories, training facilities, and, most importantly, communication nodes. She highlighted one of the gold markers located in the Vega system. This facility is still active and waiting for contact from ancient descendants. If I'm right, it will respond to human neural patterns the same way the library did. And it contains something we desperately need: a complete technical database for the quantum entanglement communication network. "Why is that important?" asked Captain Rivera, the Earth Defense Force representative. Maya's expression grew grim. "Because we're not the only world that was seeded. According to the crystal, there are at least 12 other human colonies scattered throughout the galaxy, all descended from ancient refugees. Some of them have probably reached the harvesting threshold already. They need to be warned, and we need to coordinate our response." "Response to what?" Dr. Webb asked. "You still haven't provided any proof that these harvesters actually exist." Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then, she activated the final section of her datapad. The projection that appeared above the table was complex and disturbing, a three-dimensional representation of galactic space over the past 100,000 years, showing the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. Each civilization followed the same pattern: rapid technological advancement, expansion into space, the achievement of certain key technologies, and then abrupt disappearance. The timing was remarkably consistent. Every species vanished within 500 years of achieving dimensional manipulation technology. "This is the pattern," Maya said quietly. "Species after species, all following the same timeline. And look at the intervals between extinction events." The projection zoomed out to show a longer timeline. The gaps between civilization collapses were precisely 40,000 years, with only minor variations. "The last major extinction event was 1,230 years ago," Maya continued. "We're overdue for the next cycle. And, according to the crystal's knowledge, the delay isn't random. The harvesters have been searching for something that escaped them during the last culling." The room erupted in heated discussion as the implications sank in. If Maya was right, humanity wasn't just facing the threat of alien invasion. They were facing beings who had been actively hunting their ancestors for over 1,000 years. Admiral Chen called for order. "Dr. Chun, even if we accept your interpretation of this data, what you're proposing is essentially preparation for a war against beings we know nothing about, using technology we don't understand, in coordination with colonies we can't even contact." "That's exactly what I'm proposing," Maya said firmly. "But we do know something about them." The crystal's knowledge included tactical analysis from the last time the ancients fought the harvesters. "We know their weaknesses. We know how to hide from their sensors. And we know what weapons can actually damage them." Dr. Webb was still studying the technical schematics Maya had provided. These designs, some of them, are clearly beyond our current manufacturing capabilities. But others, he looked up with excitement. Others are modifications to technology we already have. This defensive system here, it's basically an enhanced version of the gravitational field generators we use for atmosphere processing on colony worlds. The ancients designed their contingency plan around the assumption that their descendants would rediscover certain technologies naturally, Maya explained. They couldn't leave advanced weapons lying around where they might be found by other species, but they could leave instructions for modifying our own technology in ways that would be effective against the harvesters. Captain Rivera leaned forward. How much time do we have? Maya consulted her notes. According to the crystal's projection models, humanity will achieve dimensional manipulation technology within the next 18 months. Once that happens, we have maybe 2 years before the harvesters notice and begin preparation for harvesting. After that, she shrugged. The historical pattern suggests we have about 50 years of active conflict before civilization is eliminated. 50 years might be enough, Admiral Chen said thoughtfully. If we can contact these other human colonies, coordinate our efforts, and begin implementing the defensive technologies you've described. There's one more thing, Maya said reluctantly. The crystal's knowledge came with a warning. The information is designed to be self-limiting. It can only be fully downloaded into one human consciousness at a time. If I die before passing it on properly, most of the technical specifications will be lost. Dr. Webb looked alarmed. What do you mean, passing it on properly? Maya activated her scanner and showed them the readings she had been monitoring for weeks. Her brain activity had changed dramatically since her contact with the crystal. New neural pathways were forming, and her consciousness was somehow expanded beyond normal human parameters. I'm changing, she said simply. The crystal's download process has begun converting me into something like the ancients' original form. I can feel my awareness expanding, my understanding deepening. But it's also making me less human. She could see the fear in their eyes, but she pressed on. According to the crystal's instructions, I need to establish contact with the communication node in the Vega system within the next few weeks. Once that connection is made, I can begin transferring the knowledge to properly prepared recipients. People who have been genetically and technologically enhanced to handle the download without losing their humanity. And if we refuse, Admiral Chen asked, then, in 18 months, humanity achieves dimensional manipulation. In 24 months, the harvesters notice. And in 75 years, our species joins the list of civilizations that grew too advanced for their own good. Maya looked around the table at the faces of Earth's most powerful leaders. She could see the struggle in their expressions, the difficulty of accepting a reality that challenged everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the universe. I know it sounds insane, she said gently, but consider this. What if I'm right? What if there really are beings out there who have been culling intelligent species for millions of years? Can we afford to ignore that possibility? Dr. Webb was the first to speak. The technologies you've described, even if we built them, how would we test them? How would we know they work against threats we've never encountered? Maya smiled grimly. According to the crystal, we won't have to wait long to find out. The harvesters have been monitoring human technological development for decades. They already know we're approaching the threshold. What they don't know is that we're aware of their existence. She activated a final projection, showing the outer edge of human space. Several previously unexplored systems were highlighted with warning markers. These systems have shown unusual energy readings in recent months, readings that match the signatures the Crystal associates with Harvester Scout ships. They're not just coming, they're already here, gathering intelligence for the next culling cycle. The room fell silent as the full implications hit them. If Maya was right, humanity was already under surveillance by beings who intended to destroy their civilization. The only question was whether they could prepare an effective defense in time. Admiral Chen stood up slowly. Dr. Chen, I'm authorizing an immediate expedition to the Vega system. If this communication node exists and responds to human contact the way you claim it will, then we'll know you're telling the truth. And if you're telling the truth, then we have a war to prepare for, Maya finished. A war that humanity has been getting ready to fight for 40,000 years. As the meeting broke up and the various representatives hurried off to begin implementation of humanity's most desperate gamble, Maya remained in the briefing room, staring at the star map still glowing above the conference table. Somewhere out there, the harvesters were preparing for another cycle of destruction. But this time, the prey had evolved beyond their expectations. This time, the hunters were about to become the hunted. The expedition to Vega moved faster than anything Maya had ever seen the colonial authority organize. Within 2 weeks of her presentation at Luna Station, a specially modified research vessel called the Prometheus was racing through hyperspace toward the coordinates she had provided. The ship carried not only Maya and her original archaeological team, but also military specialists, quantum physicists, and 3 volunteers who had agreed to undergo the neural enhancement procedures necessary to receive the ancient knowledge downloads. Maya spent most of the journey in the ship's medical bay, working with Dr. Elizabeth Kane to develop the enhancement protocols. The process was risky and largely theoretical, based on information the crystal had downloaded into Maya's consciousness about ancient physiology and neural architecture. The basic challenge was that human brains simply weren't designed to handle the vast amount of information contained in the ancient databases. The original download Maya had received was already pushing her consciousness to its limits, and she could feel herself changing in ways that made her teammates increasingly uncomfortable. Her perception of time had shifted dramatically. She could process information faster than should have been humanly possible, and she frequently found herself finishing other people's sentences or responding to questions before they were fully asked. More disturbing was her growing emotional detachment. The urgent fear and excitement she had felt during her presentation to Earth's leaders was fading, replaced by a cold, analytical perspective that reminded her uncomfortably of the librarian constructs. The neural mapping shows significant structural changes, Dr. Kane reported as she reviewed Maya's latest brain scans. New neural pathways are forming at an accelerated rate, and your consciousness is beginning to partition itself into specialized subsections. It's fascinating, but also deeply concerning. Maya studied the scans with her enhanced perception, easily understanding the complex neurological data that would have been incomprehensible to her just weeks earlier. The ancient consciousness was fundamentally different from human consciousness, she explained. They thought in parallel rather than linearly, processing multiple complex concepts simultaneously. The download is trying to restructure my brain to match their cognitive patterns. And the volunteers? Dr. Kane asked, are you certain they can handle partial downloads without experiencing the same transformation? Maya considered the question carefully. The 3 volunteers, Dr. Sarah Kim from her original team, along with Colonel Marcus Torres from Earth Defense Force, and Dr. Yuki Tanaka from Advanced Research Division, had all undergone genetic modifications designed to enhance their neural plasticity. According to the ancient knowledge, this should allow them to receive limited downloads without losing their fundamental humanity. The theory is sound, Maya said finally, but we won't know for certain until we reach the communication node and begin the transfer process. The Prometheus dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vega system 5 days later. What they found there challenged Maya's expectations despite everything the crystal had prepared her for. The facility wasn't hidden. It was enormous, clearly artificial, and broadcasting a powerful signal that lit up every sensor on the ship. But somehow, previous surveys of the Vega system had completely missed it. It existed in a state of dimensional phase shifting that made it invisible to normal detection methods, while remaining perfectly solid and functional. My God, breathed Captain Harrison, the Prometheus's commanding officer. How big is that thing? Maya studied the sensor readings with her enhanced perception. The facility was roughly cylindrical, about 50 kilometers long and 20 kilometers in diameter. Its surface was covered with the same flowing organic architecture she had seen in the library, but on a scale that suggested it had been built for beings much larger than humans. It's not just a communication node, Maya realized. It's a command center, a coordination hub for the entire resistance network. As the Prometheus approached, symbols began appearing in space around the facility, the same flowing script Maya had encountered in the library. Her scanner translated them automatically, but she found she could read them directly now without technological assistance. Welcome, children of the ancients. You have arrived at the primary coordination facility for Operation Exodus. Please dock at Port 17 for consciousness verification and knowledge transfer procedures. Dr. Kane looked at Maya with concern. Consciousness verification? That doesn't sound ominous at all. Maya was already moving toward the ship's docking bay. It's a security measure. The facility needs to confirm that we're actually ancient descendants and not some other species that happened to stumble across the coordinates. The docking process was unlike anything the Prometheus's crew had experienced. Instead of mechanical clamps and airlocks, the facility extended what could only be described as tendrils of living metal that merged seamlessly with the ship's hull, creating a perfect environmental seal. Breathable atmosphere flowed into the connection tunnel, carrying scents that reminded Maya of earth forests and ocean spray. The interior of the facility was even more overwhelming than the library had been. Vast chambers stretched in all directions, filled with equipment that hummed with barely contained power. But most impressive were the other occupants of the facility. They weren't human, exactly, but they were unmistakably descended from the same genetic base. Some appear to have undergone extensive cybernetic enhancement, with mechanical components integrated so seamlessly with biological tissue that it was impossible to tell where technology ended and biology began. Others had clearly evolved along different paths, developing larger craniums to accommodate enhanced brain capacity or modified sensory organs for processing different types of information. Representatives from the 12 seeded worlds, Maya explained to her stunned companions. Some of them have been in contact with facilities like this one for decades. Others are just arriving for the first time, like us. A figure approached from across the vast chamber, tall, elegant, with the flowing movements Maya had come to associate with consciousness that operated on multiple levels simultaneously. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in Maya's mind rather than as sound. Welcome, representative of Earth's children. I am designated as Coordinator Prime for this facility. Your arrival indicates that Earth has achieved sufficient technological development to participate in the final phase of Operation Exodus. Maya responded in kind, finding that she could project her thoughts with increasing ease. What is Operation Exodus? The culmination of 40,000 years of preparation. The harvesters have detected the approach of dimensional manipulation technology among several seeded worlds. The next culling cycle has already begun. We estimate 18 months until full harvester arrival in this sector. Around the chamber, other representatives of the seeded worlds were gathered in clusters, their enhanced consciousness allowing for rapid information exchange that would have taken hours using conventional communication. Maya could sense the urgency in their mental interactions, the desperate coordination of species that had been preparing for this moment for millennia. What's our status compared to the other worlds? Maya asked. Coordinator Prime shared a complex data stream that Maya's enhanced consciousness processed instantly. Of the 12 seeded worlds, 3 had already been discovered and harvested during preliminary scouting operations. 4 others had achieved dimensional manipulation decades ago and were already under active surveillance. 2 more had failed to develop beyond primitive agricultural societies and were being written off as evolutionary dead ends. That left only 3 worlds with populations capable of contributing to the resistance. Earth, a world designated as Kepler 438b, where humans had developed advanced biotechnology, and a colony on a moon of Tau Ceti where the descendants had specialized in quantum consciousness research. The plan requires coordination between all 3 populations, Coordinator Prime explained. Earth's descendants have achieved the most balanced technological development and will serve as the primary coordination hub. Kepler 438b's biotechnology will provide the foundation for enhanced resistance forces, and Tau Ceti's quantum research is essential for the consciousness transfer protocols. Maya absorbed this information while simultaneously becoming aware of the knowledge transfer preparations taking place around them. The three volunteers from Earth were being prepared for specialized downloads that would give them access to specific aspects of ancient technology. Weapon systems for Colonel Torres, defensive networks for Dr. Tanaka, and communication protocols for Dr. Kim. But Maya was being prepared for something different. Something that made her teammates look at her with growing concern and fear. The full command download, Coordinator Prime explained privately to Maya. The complete ancient military and technological database, along with command authority over all resistance assets. The transformation will be irreversible. Your human consciousness will be preserved, but fundamentally altered. You will become the primary coordinator for Operation Exodus. Maya felt her enhanced awareness analyzing the proposal with cold, logical precision. The emotional part of her consciousness, what remained of her original human personality, recoiled from the idea of losing even more of her humanity. But the rational analysis was overwhelming. Without centralized command authority, the scattered resistance forces would be unable to coordinate effectively against the harvesters. What about the others? Maya asked. My team, the crew of the Prometheus? What happens to them? They return to Earth to begin implementation of the resistance protocols. Manufacturing facilities will be established to produce the weapons and defensive systems described in the downloads. Military forces will be trained in ancient combat techniques. And, most importantly, the quantum entanglement communication network will be activated to coordinate with the other resistance worlds. Maya looked back at her team, seeing the mixture of awe and fear in their faces as they witnessed technology and beings that challenged every assumption about human development and capabilities. She could sense their thoughts with her enhanced perception, their worry about her continuing transformation, their excitement about the technologies they were being exposed to, and their growing understanding of the magnitude of the threat humanity was facing. The choice was clear, even if it was terrible. Accept the full download and lose the last traces of her humanity, or refuse and potentially doom the entire resistance effort to failure due to lack of coordination. But as Maya considered her options, she became aware of something else. A presence at the edge of her consciousness that felt familiar, yet impossible. The crystal from the library on Kepler 442b had contained more than just ancient knowledge. It had contained fragments of consciousness from the beings who had originally created it. You're not gone, Maya whispered, understanding flooding through her enhanced awareness. The original ancients. You're still here, preserved in the knowledge crystals. Coordinator Prime's form shifted with what might have been surprise. The primary consciousness fragments have been dormant for millennia. If they're awakening now, Maya felt the presence in her mind growing stronger, ancient memories and experiences that weren't her own beginning to surface. But instead of overwhelming her human consciousness, they were supporting it, showing her how to maintain her essential humanity while accepting the vast responsibilities of command authority. They've been waiting, Maya realized, not just for someone to find the forbidden knowledge, but for someone who could bridge the gap between human and ancient consciousness. Someone who could lead the resistance without losing sight of what they're fighting to protect. The full download began without any further consultation. Maya felt her consciousness expanding exponentially as millennia of ancient knowledge, experience, and capability flooded into her awareness. But this time, instead of fighting the transformation, she guided it, using the awakened ancient consciousness fragments as a template for maintaining her essential humanity while gaining the tools necessary to coordinate a galactic resistance. When the process was complete, Maya remained recognizably herself, but she was also something more. She could perceive the entire galactic situation with crystalline clarity, understanding not just the immediate threat posed by the Harvesters, but the long-term implications of the conflict for the future evolution of intelligent life in the galaxy. The Resistance had been preparing for 40,000 years, but now Maya could see that the Harvesters had been preparing even longer. They had refined their culling techniques over millions of years, developing strategies and technologies specifically designed to counter exactly the kind of resistance the ancients had organized. But the Harvesters had made one critical error. They had assumed that any species advanced enough to threaten them would follow the same evolutionary path as previous civilizations. They were prepared for ancient-level technology operated by ancient-level consciousness. They were not prepared for ancient-level technology operated by human-level determination and creativity. Maya turned to face her team, her enhanced consciousness already beginning to formulate the strategy that would define humanity's war for survival. "We need to return to Earth immediately," she said. "We have 18 months to prepare for the greatest conflict in galactic history. And for the first time in millions of years, the Harvesters are going to discover what it means to underestimate their prey." Colonel Torres stepped forward, his mind still reeling from the tactical downloads he had received. "Ma'am, what are our orders?" Maya smiled, and for a moment, her teammates caught a glimpse of the human archaeologist who had started this journey by digging in alien ruins. But behind her eyes was something vast and ancient and utterly determined to see humanity survive what was coming. "We're going to do something the Harvesters have never encountered before," Maya said. "We're going to make them afraid." 16 months later, Maya stood in the command center of the newly constructed Resistance headquarters on Luna, watching the final preparations for humanity's first strike against the Harvesters. The facility had been built using ancient architectural principles, its organic flowing walls integrated seamlessly with human engineering to create something that was both alien and familiar. Around her, dozens of enhanced humans worked with machine precision and human intuition, coordinating the activities of three worlds through the quantum entanglement communication network. The sight would have been impossible to imagine when Maya first touched the alien symbols on Kepler 442b, but now it felt as natural as breathing. The transformation of human civilization had been dramatic and swift. Within 6 months of Maya's return with the ancient knowledge, every major colony world had construction facilities producing weapons and defensive systems that pushed the boundaries of physical law. The quantum consciousness transfer protocols have been used to rapidly train military specialists in ancient combat techniques. And most importantly, the dimensional phase-shifting technology had been implemented on a massive scale, allowing human ships and facilities to exist partially outside normal space-time. But Maya's enhanced consciousness could perceive the growing tension in the quantum foam that surrounded the solar system. The Harvesters were close now, their massive ships moving through dimensions that existed adjacent to normal space. Preliminary sensor sweeps had detected at least 12 Harvester vessels, each one larger than Earth's moon and carrying technologies that had wiped out countless civilizations. Coordinator Maya called Dr. Kim from her position at the communication console. The title had evolved naturally as Maya's role in the Resistance became clear to everyone around her. She was still recognizably human, but her consciousness now operated on levels that allowed her to coordinate activities across multiple star systems simultaneously. The Tau Ceti colony reports successful completion of the Consciousness Arc project, Dr. Kim continued. They've successfully transferred the complete psychological and cultural templates of their entire population into quantum storage matrices. If their world is destroyed during the conflict, they could be restored on any suitable planet. Maya absorbed this information while simultaneously monitoring reports from the Kepler 438b colony, where bioengineered resistance fighters were emerging from accelerated growth chambers. These warriors combined human intelligence and creativity with biological enhancements that made them capable of surviving in environments that would kill normal humans. More importantly, their nervous systems have been modified to resist the Harvester's primary weapon, a form of neural disruption that had paralyzed the defenses of every previous civilization. Status on the Dimensional Anchor Network. Maya asked. Colonel Torres, now enhanced with military knowledge spanning millennia, responded immediately. 97% operational. We can lock Harvester ships into normal space-time and prevent their escape to their home dimension. But the power requirements are enormous. We'll only be able to maintain the field for approximately 6 hours. Maya had known this would be the critical limitation. The Dimensional Anchor Network was humanity's most important strategic weapon, based on ancient technology that could force beings of pure energy back into physical form. But the energy costs meant they would have only one chance to use it effectively. That should be sufficient, Maya said, her enhanced consciousness analyzing probability matrices with computational precision. The Harvesters have never encountered organized resistance. They're accustomed to civilizations that panic and scatter when they arrive. They won't expect coordinated defensive action. A new presence touched Maya's consciousness through the Quantum Communication Network, Coordinator Prime, from the Vega facility. The exchange of information took place at speeds that would have been impossible for unenhanced humans to follow. Final Harvester fleet composition confirmed, Coordinator Prime reported. 12 primary vessels, each carrying approximately 10,000 Harvester entities. Support fleet includes dimensional scouts, neural disruptors, and matter conversion platforms. Total estimated force: 120,000 individual Harvesters plus their technological assets. Maya processed this information against the resistance capabilities now available to humanity. The bioengineered warriors from Kepler 438b numbered only about 50,000, but their enhancements made each one capable of fighting multiple Harvester entities. The weapon systems based on ancient technology were devastating, but required careful coordination to be effective. And the consciousness transfer protocols meant that even death in battle wouldn't necessarily be permanent for enhanced resistance fighters. But the real advantage wasn't in numbers or technology. It was in the fundamental difference between human and ancient psychology. The original ancients had been logical, methodical, and predictable in their strategic thinking. The Harvesters had learned to counter that type of opposition over millions of years. Humans, on the other hand, were chaos incarnate. Their strategies incorporated elements of intuition, desperation, and pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat that the Harvesters had never encountered before. Maya's enhanced consciousness had absorbed ancient knowledge and capabilities, but her core remained fundamentally human, and that made her unpredictable in ways that could be strategically decisive. Harvester emergence detected, announced Dr. Tanaka from the sensor array. Multiple dimensional rifts opening throughout the outer system. They're using their standard approach pattern, established perimeter control, then systematic harvesting operations moving inward. Maya felt her consciousness shift into combat mode, connecting directly with command systems throughout human space. Her awareness expanded to encompass not just Luna's command center, but also the defensive platforms around Earth, the strike fleets positioned at strategic points throughout the solar system, and the resistance forces on the other two worlds. For the first time in 40,000 years, the Harvesters were about to encounter prey that was ready for them. The first Harvester ship to fully emerge into normal space was a behemoth that dwarfed anything in the human fleet. Its hull seemed to be constructed from crystallized energy, flowing and shifting in patterns that hurt to look at directly. As it moved through space, reality itself seemed to bend around it, creating distortions that rendered normal navigation impossible. Dimensional anchor activation in 3 minutes, Colonel Torres reported. All fleet elements are in position. Maya could feel the tension building throughout the human forces. This was the moment they had been preparing for, but it was also the greatest gamble in human history. If the dimensional anchors failed, if the harvester's technology was more advanced than the ancient knowledge suggested, if any of dozens of critical systems malfunctioned, human civilization would end in the next few hours. But Maya's enhanced consciousness was calm. She had absorbed not just ancient knowledge, but also ancient perspective, and from that viewpoint, this moment had been inevitable since the first human looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Initiating dimensional anchor sequence, Dr. Tanaka announced. Space itself seemed to convulse as the anchor network activated. Massive generators positioned throughout the solar system began pouring energy into quantum fields that reached across dimensions, grabbing the partially phased harvester ships and dragging them into full physical reality. The effect on the harvesters was immediate and dramatic. Ships that had been moving with supernatural grace suddenly became sluggish and vulnerable. The crystalline energy beings that comprised the harvester entities found themselves forced into forms that could be damaged by conventional weapons. But their response was equally swift. Neural disruptor waves swept across the solar system, designed to paralyze the consciousness of any intelligent species and leave them helpless for harvesting. It was the weapon that had ended the resistance of countless civilizations. It was also completely ineffective against consciousness that had been enhanced with ancient technology and human stubbornness. Maya felt the disruptor waves wash over her consciousness like cold water, acknowledged and then dismissed. Throughout the solar system, enhanced humans shrugged off effects that should have left them catatonic, while bioengineered warriors from Kepler 438b laughed as weapons designed to target biological neural networks slid harmlessly off their modified consciousness structures. All units, execute Operation Prometheus, Maya commanded through the quantum network. The human fleet emerged from phase-shifted hiding positions throughout the solar system, their weapon systems charged with energy derived from technologies that the harvesters recognized as ancient in origin. But the tactical deployment was purely human, chaotic, unpredictable, and utterly without regard for conventional strategic thinking. Instead of forming neat battle lines or attempting to engage the harvesters in organized formation combat, the human ships scattered like a swarm of angry insects, attacking from every direction simultaneously while using their phase-shifting capabilities to appear and disappear unpredictably. The harvesters had never encountered anything like it. Their weapons systems, designed to target predictable enemy formations, struggled to lock onto targets that refused to follow logical patterns. Their command protocols, refined over millions of years of successful cullings, couldn't adapt quickly enough to opponents who seemed to be making up strategy as they went along. Maya watched the battle unfold with her enhanced consciousness, simultaneously coordinating the actions of thousands of individual units while maintaining awareness of the overall strategic situation. The dimensional anchor network was holding, keeping the harvesters trapped in normal space where they could be damaged by conventional weapons enhanced with ancient technology. But she could also see that the harvesters were adapting faster than expected. Their crystalline ships were beginning to resonate in frequencies that interfered with human phase-shifting technology. Their energy weapons were modulating to counter ancient defensive systems. And, worst of all, they were beginning to coordinate their actions in ways that suggested they were learning from the unexpected resistance they were encountering. Coordinator Prime reports successful activation of the Kepler 438b bioweapon, Dr. Kim announced. Harvester entities are showing vulnerability to the modified viral agent. This was the Resistance's most desperate gamble, a biological weapon designed using ancient knowledge and enhanced with human biotechnology from the Kepler 438b colony. The virus was specifically engineered to target the quantum coherence patterns that allowed harvester entities to maintain their energy-based existence. If it worked, it would force them into fully physical form where they could be killed by conventional weapons. The effect was visible almost immediately. Harvester entities throughout the fleet began losing their ethereal properties, their crystalline forms becoming solid and vulnerable. But Maya's enhanced consciousness detected something else. The harvesters were transmitting data about the bioweapon to somewhere else, somewhere outside the solar system. They're calling for reinforcements, Maya realized with growing alarm. This isn't their main fleet. It's just a scouting force. The implications were staggering. If the 12 ships currently trapped in the solar system were just scouts, then the main harvester fleet would be orders of magnitude larger. Even worse, they would now be prepared for human tactics and resistant to the bioweapon that was proving so effective against the current force. But Maya's consciousness was already adapting to this new information, formulating strategies that incorporated the harsh reality of facing an enemy with vastly superior numbers and technology. The harvesters might be ancient and powerful, but they had made one critical error. They had underestimated human adaptability and the willingness to sacrifice everything for survival. All units, prepare for Operation Samson, Maya commanded. Colonel Torres looked at her with alarm. Coordinator, that protocol was designated as absolute last resort only. We're past the point of conventional options, Maya replied. If we don't stop their reinforcements from arriving, everything we've accomplished here is meaningless. Operation Samson was based on a terrible piece of ancient knowledge. The technical specifications for weapons that could damage the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Using them would tear holes in reality that might take millennia to heal, but they were the only weapons powerful enough to prevent the harvesters from using their dimensional travel capabilities. Maya felt the weight of the decision settling on her consciousness like a physical burden. She was about to order the deployment of weapons that could potentially damage the fabric of reality itself. But the alternative was the extinction of not just humanity, but every intelligent species that might evolve in this galaxy for millions of years to come. The quantum field generators that had been used for dimensional anchoring were reconfigured in real time, their purpose shifting from holding enemy ships in normal space to tearing holes in the dimensional barriers that allowed faster-than-light travel. The energy requirements were enormous, drawing power from every available source throughout human space. When the weapons fired, the effect was visible across multiple dimensions. Space-time itself began to crack like breaking glass, creating zones of dimensional instability that would prevent any form of faster-than-light travel for decades to come. The Harvester Scout fleet found itself not just trapped in normal space, but cut off completely from their home dimension and any possibility of reinforcement. But the cost was equally dramatic. The dimensional damage was spreading outward from the weapon firing points, creating zones where the normal laws of physics no longer applied consistently. Ships caught in the expanding instability fields were torn apart at the molecular level. Entire sections of the solar system became uninhabitable as reality itself became unreliable. Maya watched the destruction with her enhanced consciousness, calculating the long-term implications with ancient precision while feeling the human horror of what she had been forced to authorize. Billions of humans would need to be evacuated from the damaged areas. The solar system's economy would take generations to recover, and the dimensional instability would prevent humanity from using faster-than-light travel for at least 50 years. But they had won. The Harvester Scout fleet was destroyed, their reinforcements could not arrive, and the bioweapon data had been contained within the dimensional dead zone created by the reality-tearing weapons. Humanity had achieved something no species had managed in millions of years. They had fought the harvesters and survived. More importantly, they had learned. The consciousness transfer protocols meant that the experiences of every enhanced human who had participated in the battle were now part of the collective knowledge base. The next time the harvesters came, humanity would be ready with tactics and technologies refined through actual combat experience. Standing in the command center as damage reports flowed in from throughout the solar system, Maya felt the ancient consciousness fragments in her mind stirring with something that might have been approval. The original ancients had planned for their descendants to survive the harvesters, but they had never imagined that survival would come through methods so chaotic and destructive. Humans had not just survived the harvest, They had turned the harvesters' own tactics against them, using the same unpredictability and adaptability that had allowed them to evolve from primitive apes to star-faring civilization in just a few million years. Coordinator Dr. Kim reported, "We're receiving transmissions from colony worlds outside the solar system. They're requesting instructions for implementing resistance protocols." Maya nodded, her enhanced consciousness already shifting focus from immediate battle damage to long-term strategic planning. The harvesters would return eventually, probably with better preparation and understanding of human capabilities. But they would find a galaxy where their prey had become predators, where chaos and creativity had replaced the predictable patterns they had learned to exploit over millions of years. "Begin Phase 2 of Operation Exodus," Maya commanded. "It's time to take the fight to them." For the first time in galactic history, a harvest had failed. The hunters had become the hunted. And somewhere in the vast darkness between dimensions, ancient beings of crystallized malevolence were learning what it meant to be afraid.